You can't do that in a garage. There's just a few places in the world with the right equipment and only a few people in the world with the right training to be able to do that.
There are moments in the automotive world that stop everything. Moments where the entire industry collectively puts down its torque wrench, steps back from the lift, and says, "Did that actually just happen?" This is one of those moments. A crashed Bugatti Chiron Per Sport, one of only 59 ever built, was sitting in Miami, mangled, blacklisted, and declared dead by the most exclusive car company on the planet. Then a mechanic from England with a YouTube channel and an almost reckless amount of confidence decided that dead wasn't good enough for him. What followed was a David versus Goliath story that didn't just make headlines, it made history. Because when Matt Armstrong started turning bolts on that carbon fiber carcass, he unknowingly set in motion a chain of events that would force the CEO of Bugatti himself to do something nobody in the automotive world had ever seen before. Not a lawsuit. Not a cease and desist letter. Not corporate silence. Something far more powerful, far more unexpected, and far more human than any of us had any right to expect. To understand just how seismic this story is, you need to understand what a Bugatti Chiron Per Sport actually represents. This isn't a car in the traditional sense. It isn't something you see at traffic lights or find on a used car lot with slightly questionable service history. The Chiron Per Sport is a philosophical statement on 4 wheels. 59 of them exist. 59. To put that into perspective, your local high school probably has more students than there are Chiron Per Sports on the entire surface of the planet. Each one costs approximately $4 million. Each one is a handcrafted expression of what happens when engineers are given an unlimited budget, zero interference, and told to build something that makes the laws of physics feel slightly embarrassed. So when one of them gets into an accident, a particularly cruel accident in Miami involving a delivery truck that cost a fraction of the Bugatti's headlights alone, the response from the factory in Molsheim, France is not what you'd call sympathetic. Bugatti's position on crashed cars has always been absolute. A compromised Chiron is not a repair job. It is not a challenge to be overcome. It is, in the eyes of the brand, a former Bugatti. A thing that once was, and now simply isn't. They sent a technician from France to inspect the wreckage. The verdict arrived with all the warmth of a guillotine. Total loss. But they didn't stop there. They took the extra step of blacklisting the car's VIN in their global system, which meant that no authorized dealer anywhere in the world, not in Dubai, not in Tokyo, not in Geneva, could legally order so much as a single replacement part for this specific chassis. The car was electronically erased. $4 million of carbon fiber, leather, and engineering genius reduced to a very expensive piece of modern sculpture that the factory had decided would never move under its own power again. And then there was the ransom note disguised as a repair estimate. If the owner wanted Bugatti to resurrect the car on their terms, through their authorized channels, they would need to send it back to France. The preliminary parts estimate alone came in at a figure that made grown men laugh out of sheer disbelief. A pair of headlights at 6 figures. Each front fender priced at a figure that could buy you a brand new family home in several parts of the world. The iconic horseshoe grille approaching the price of a luxury sports car in its own right. The grand total for parts alone was a figure that crossed into territory that felt less like a repair quote and more like a very specific form of financial warfare. The message was clear, even if it was never stated directly. We don't want this car fixed. We want it gone. Matt Armstrong is not the kind of person who receives a message like that and quietly accepts it. He's the kind of person who reads it, sets it down, and starts calculating exactly how wrong it is. Matt built his reputation by doing things with cars that people said couldn't be done, not out of recklessness, but out of a deep, genuine belief that mechanical problems are fundamentally solvable if you approach them with enough intelligence, enough patience, and enough willingness to get your hands dirty. He arrived in Miami to survey the Chiron and found something interesting. Not a write-off. Not a lost cause. He found a car that had taken a serious hit but retained its fundamental integrity. The carbon fiber monocoque, the structural spine of the entire machine, had cracks, yes. The engine mounts had suffered. But the legendary W16 engine at the heart of the car was still mechanically viable. The unrepairable label wasn't an engineering conclusion. It was a business decision wearing an engineering costume. What Matt did next was extraordinary in its simplicity. He started documenting everything. He filmed himself assessing the damage. He explained what he was looking at in terms that anyone could understand. He pulled back the curtain on a car that had spent its entire existence behind velvet ropes and showed the world what was actually underneath all that prestige. And millions of people watched. Not because they could afford a Bugatti. Not because they were planning to fix one themselves. But because there is something universally compelling about watching a genuinely skilled person refuse to be intimidated by something that is supposed to be intimidating. Matt was speaking a language that resonated far beyond the car community. The language of competence, curiosity, and refusal to accept artificial limitations. The moment that truly set the internet on fire came when Matt needed to separate the front and rear sections of the car to properly assess the drivetrain. This procedure, according to Bugatti's official documentation and public statements, required specialized facilities that existed in only 2 locations on the entire planet. Proprietary jigs. Laser-guided equipment. An environment of almost surgical precision. The implication was obvious. Attempting this anywhere else was not just difficult, it was dangerous. It was the kind of statement designed to make the project feel impossible before it started. Matt looked at the problem, looked around his workshop in the English Midlands, and came up with his solution. A 2-post lift. Some timber. And a plastic workshop trash can whose wheeled base he repurposed to support one of the most expensive engines ever installed in a road car. The moment those 2 halves separated, cleanly, safely, precisely, was one of the most quietly devastating things to happen to a corporate mythology in recent memory. Because what it revealed wasn't chaos. It wasn't a disaster. It was actually a masterclass in modular engineering. The entire front and rear sections of this $4 million hypercar were connected by 14 primary titanium bolts. 14. These were high-quality fasteners, absolutely. Precision engineered, certainly. But they were bolts. Bolts follow physics. Physics doesn't have an exclusive licensing agreement with Molsheim. The car that supposedly required facilities available in only 2 places on Earth had been cleanly split by a man working with a trash can and a lifetime of mechanical instinct. The myth of the unreachable hypercar had just been walked backward into a corner by someone who refused to believe it. The pressure building around this story reached a boiling point when the car's owner decided to escalate publicly. In a move that could have gone spectacularly wrong in multiple ways, he posted a public ultimatum on social media directed at Bugatti, setting a 24-hour deadline. The message was simple and electric. Either unblacklist this car, or watch us 3D print every single part we need. From the outside, this looked like the kind of threat a corporation like Bugatti would swat away without breaking stride. They operate under the umbrella of one of the largest automotive groups in the world. They have legal departments. They have PR teams. They have the institutional weight of decades of brand building behind them. When individuals make ultimatums to billion-dollar corporations, the outcome is generally not in the individual's favor. But something was different this time. The audience watching this story wasn't dozens of enthusiasts on a niche forum. It was millions of people across multiple platforms, many of whom were seeing the internal mechanics of a Bugatti Chiron for the very first time. They were watching someone dismantle the mythology of the untouchable hypercar bolt by bolt, and they were fascinated. The 3D printing threat wasn't just a bluff, it was a philosophical grenade. Because even if the printed parts couldn't handle the structural demands of a 1,500 horsepower machine at speed, the mere possibility that someone could replicate a component worth thousands of dollars using modern manufacturing technology exposed the pricing structure for exactly what it was. The price wasn't about the material. It wasn't about the engineering. It was about control. And control, in the age of CNC machines and 3D scanners and YouTube tutorials, is becoming an increasingly difficult thing to maintain. As Matt continued digging deeper into the car's anatomy, he started finding something that added another layer to the story. Hidden within the Bugatti systems, stamped on components tucked away from casual view, were part numbers and identifiers that pointed not to some exclusive bespoke supplier, but to the broader Volkswagen Group's shared parts inventory. Sensors that appeared in Audis. Clips and fasteners common to other vehicles in the corporate family. Their entirely bespoke narrative that justified the extraordinary markups on everything from routine maintenance to crash repair was, in certain corners of the car, considerably more complicated than the brochure suggested. Matt wasn't just fixing a car anymore. He was performing a forensic examination of the hypercar industry's most profitable assumptions. Here is where the story stops being about a car and starts being about something much larger. Mate Rimac is not a traditional luxury automotive executive. He is someone who, not long ago, was a young engineer with an old BMW and an idea that seemed absurd at the time, that he could build an electric vehicle fast enough to embarrass combustion engine supercars. He built his company from a garage. He understands, at a cellular level, what it means to be the person in the workshop who everyone says is wasting their time. When the Matt Armstrong story started gaining momentum, Rimac wasn't watching it the way a CEO watches a potential liability. He was watching it the way an engineer watches another engineer do something interesting. His response, when it came, was nothing that anyone expected. No legal threats. No corporate statement filled with careful language and careful nothing. Rimac made direct personal contact with the car's owner. He introduced himself, and the informality of that introduction carried its own message. He wasn't arriving with the full weight of a corporate hierarchy behind him. He was arriving as someone who understood cars, understood the situation, and wanted to talk. He acknowledged the frustrations around the repair costs. He addressed the safety concerns around 3D printed structural components honestly and directly, not as a legal defense but as a genuine engineering concern from someone who has spent his career thinking about the forces these cars endure. And then he did something that sent a shockwave through the automotive world. He lifted the blacklist. Officially. The car that Bugatti had declared dead, had electronically erased from existence, was restored to official status. Rimac didn't stop there. He took to social media himself, posting a video where he addressed the Matt Armstrong project directly, openly, and with a tone that felt remarkably unlike anything a CEO of a brand like Bugatti had ever used before. He acknowledged the build. He acknowledged the creativity involved. He corrected some of the pricing figures that had become exaggerated through the natural amplification of internet outrage, noting, for example, that certain costs that had been reported at extraordinary levels were based on worst-case insurance estimates rather than actual prices. He offered a path forward, a collaborative one, a conversation between the factory and the workshop, between Molsheim and the Midlands. The PR calculation behind this move is almost secondary to what it represented on a human level. Rimac recognized that the story being written about his brand was not a story about a crashed car. It was a story about ownership, about the right to repair, about whether the people who pay for these machines actually own them or merely hold them on behalf of the manufacturer. By engaging honestly rather than defensively, he shifted the narrative from adversarial to collaborative. He turned a potential brand catastrophe into something genuinely interesting, a conversation between two people who both love engineering, approaching the same machine from completely different directions.